You're listening to the Scars and Guitars podcast series, and my name is Andrew Mackay-Smith. The interview subject I've got coming up for you, his name is Ivar Bjørnson, and he's from an outfit called Enslaved. The reason for the conversation is to promote their 2017 released album titled E. Let's have a listen to what he has to say. Here we go. E is Enslaved's 14th studio album. Tell us all about it.
Yeah, it's an album that was written during the last year, immediately after the first slab of touring for In Times, our previous album from 2015. I started writing the songs for the album. It derives from a concept that was developed around the letter E, not from the Latin alphabet, but from the Old Norse alphabet, which is known as the runes. Mostly made popular in today's society through the Vikings, but that's a pretty short historical period. But the runes themselves were used many hundred years before that, dating all the way back to perhaps the Bronze Age, 10,000 years ago. It was first and foremost, like any alphabet, used for writing. So they would, use it to make notations like this guy owes me 3 cows, promises to pay them back by next summer, and so on. But they also had an esoteric use, or in popular history referred to as magical purpose, for divination, bringing luck on crops and protection while on sea, and cursing your enemies and all that stuff. And they are 24 of them, representing different concepts. And this one we went into the 14th, which is appropriate, I guess, for the 14th album. That's called Evas, E-H-W-A-Z, or just E. That represents, on the surface, literally it means and depicts a horse. From the Norse mythology, the most famous, if you will, horse is Sleipnir, Odin's horse, the 8-legged. And the concept that this rune deals with is it's basically dependence and positive dependence and constructive relationships, which is, I guess, natural for Bronze Age people to associate with the horse. It must have been quite a discovery when they were able to tame them and sort of utilize them, moving around and escaping their enemies, attacking their enemies, whatever, and even, it saved you from starvation if it came to that. And I guess a lot of deep philosophical concepts developed from that relationship. That's the rune that we used to develop the concept. It's about Enslaved is typically a band that's been exploring individuals, and now it was it just seemed like the right time to explore that relationship outside of just individualism. It's still about individualism, I guess, but how it relates to the surrounding world.
Yeah, it's a good point you raised there too about the runes, I think, because they are very much in vogue on programs such as The Last Kingdom, which is derived from a Bernard Cornwell book, and I believe it's streaming on Netflix, or in Australia here it might be on Stan, I'm not quite sure. But what's your take on the way that some of these classical Norse and Scandinavian aspects of culture have been thrust into the limelight?
I think it's positive. It's all in all, it's positive because it's it's finally starting to challenge a little bit. They're starting out softly, I guess, because they have it's part of popular culture, and then you have to take into consideration that it has to take on a certain tabloid format, I guess. So we were always focus mostly on what sells, and that's still going to be angry guys, fighting other angry guys, which is just a small fraction of this history. And as we talked about, just the portrayal of the Viking Age as the actual Norse history is also very inaccurate, because there's so much more than just these 400 or 500 years. Um, but I think it's positive because it raises the question. It makes people discuss it. And like when I went to, I don't know if you're familiar with this festival. It's called Midgardsblot in Norway.
No, not familiar
Uh,
actually, mate. Tell us all about it.
it's it's sort of a metal festival that's crossed over into a historical festival in a sense. It's on historical grounds in Norway with Viking burial mounds. They have recreated a festive hall, one of the halls that they had in the Viking Age for celebratory rituals and so on. And that's rebuilt on site where they also have concerts, and then you have the classical metal part with the stage and the bands coming there to play. And they have a lot of reenactors. And historical societies and everything's just mixed together beautifully. And they also have a sort of an academic part. And this year there was a lot of interesting things going on, like presentation of research into women's role in historical times, Christian times, and so on. So I guess on the surface, it's they use these sort of battle reenactments and so on as something that attracts people. I met quite a few people from Australia there actually who went there, and then you go under the surface and you have these academic discussions and big panel debates. About both. They had one called like women's role in historical societies and today's metal scene, which is a pretty interesting thing. Um, so I think all in all positive. I sometimes, of course, you wish that you could get rid of the stereotypes a little bit faster and sort of get into more of the cultural significance, philosophy, and I guess most importantly on the whole mental well-being aspect of getting away from this linear monotheistic thing that's dominating our
Sure.
society today, and creating so many problems for so many people.
Well, I think people seek to identify with long-reaching aspects of their culture, don't they? In this society, which is very, particularly in the West, very much driven by capitalism and globalism and the like. And look, I've really enjoyed the Bernard Cromwell books, and I've really enjoyed his series. As I mentioned, it was on Netflix or on Stan here in Australia. Sorry, one of the two. But yeah, no, you raise a very good point there, particularly about the role of women as well. So you're finding when you go to some of these, whether they're festivals or these events, that the role that women played, not just in historical Scandinavian society, but in music, and particularly the music that we all love, metal, is being discussed as well.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point because it can be not only for you know directly you hear these stories on how people women how they what their experience is like in the scene. One thing is the practicality of going to festivals. I think the metal society isn't the worst one, but going to festivals and I talk to women when they go. If they want to crowd surf, they have to put on, army boots, and they have to sort of put on an extra set of, like undergarments and so on. Because people, when a woman is crowd surfing on top, they start like feeling her up and stuff. And I'm shocked. I wouldn't like even imagine that people can do stuff like that. I didn't know that they had to make all these precautions to go to a metal show, which is fucking horrible. Uh, and a lot of them don't want to go to the front of the stage because people, they use the opportunities to do this and that. So I think that's the practical side of it. But there's a broader perspective here that's about people sort of taking their opportunities to treat people differently, and that's just stupid. And I wish more people in the metal scene that had these opinions would speak out
Yeah, for
and use
sure.
their
Well,
position.
I wish the people that did that sort of stuff would just piss off completely. I mean, I'm the father of two daughters, but that's not the reason I hold this view. I mean, it's just at the end of the day, we're all fans of metal, and whether you want to watch Venom or Venom Inc. or Enslaved, we all have a right to be there, whether we want to crowd surf or be up the front of the audience in the mosh pit. We all have a right to be in the same place without getting felt up. I'm sure a male wouldn't want to be felt up by another male in the audience.
Exactly.
Not unsolicited, at least, anyway.
There you go. Yeah, it's like, I have two daughters too. So I guess the only consolation for now is that as long as they're not into hip hop, that would actually probably be worse. But
agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed.
So
Yeah,
it's
no,
all
can't
about,
stand it. Yeah.
One thing is these like big statements and everything, but I think when it comes down to it's like dudes when listening to other dudes say like bragging about stuff like that, it's easy to just one thing is not laughing about it and being like, hey, you're cool, dude. But I guess way too often we keep our mouth shut and go and just think like what an idiot and walk away. It would be easy to say like you shouldn't do that, or if you do that you should have your ass kicked or something like that. Just make a little bit of a statement that you think it's really stupid, because I think that would actually make a little bit of a change if like regular dudes in the scene would just tell their mates that that's not even funny.
That's such a good point. Regular people who go to gigs and say to their mates, look, stop being a dickhead. Don't feel up chicks just because you're in a position where pretend, without being gross or weird about it, pretend they're your mother or your sister or your daughter or your wife, and how would you like them to be treated if they're in that sort of, close proximity to males that they don't know?
Exactly. Easy.
That's it. So, mate, I digress and change gear for a sec. I want to talk about Enslaved's longevity. Look, I might be wrong here, but I think you guys have been going as a band since 1992, but you've survived at least as a band for 14 studio albums, which is incredible, especially yourself and I might mispronounce one of your bandmates' names here, so apologies if I do in advance, but Grudel Kelson.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. What's the secret to your longevity? Because you've survived numerous changes to not just personnel in the band, but enormous changes to the musical metal landscape as well.
Yeah, I think the solution is just the mission statement. The plan from the beginning on was very easy, and I think that was due to maybe to young age, but also to a very high degree of enthusiasm. We decided, like the ambition from the beginning, from the get-go, was to make music that we want to listen to ourselves. We want to have a mix of our own record collections, our own perceptions of how music should be for us, and sort of the lyrical themes that had a meaning for us. And the measurement of success would be how close we came to achieving that. Nothing more, nothing less. And that's still what we operate by. So and I think that made us very resistant to times of frustration and so on, because if we had some albums or a lineup at a certain point that didn't feel right or so on, that didn't feel like the end of anything. It just felt like, okay, now we're sort of straying a little bit away from that path that we want to be on. But hey, that's what happens when you're searching. Sometimes you get closer, and sometimes we get further away from what you're looking for, and that's the whole process. That's the process we enjoy in itself, and I guess that's a great motivation. Also, I think that we developed quite early on a relationship that's Grutle he tends to refer to us more as brothers than best friends. Sometimes we're all brothers and best friends, but we're always brothers, and that sort of makes that glue stick. It's like family. Like in periods, I'll be more interested in topics that he's not that interested in, or we'll go and explore different musical interests. There'll be different situations in our family lives, in our lives outside the bands and all that stuff. But we'll always have that glue that brings us together in Enslaved. And that's sort of, I think some bands get stressed out when they discover that the whole thing, like look, talk, and say the same things all the time. When that sort of starts to dissolving after 10 to 15 years, that people feel that we're drifting apart. But what's happening is actually just life. And recognizing that, I think, just makes it even stronger.
So, mate, You are a noted guitarist. You're an excellent guitarist. So I wish to compliment you on that. I'm also a guitarist and a bass player. And in fact, in
Yes.
2011, Metal Sucks named you as one of the best modern metal guitarists. So who are your inspirations on the guitar?
Yeah, the inspiration is quite varied, I would dare say. I have like from the um, classic rock scene, I would say Robert Fripp for King Crimson, David
Nice.
Gilmour
Excellent influence
out
to
of
have. Yeah.
Floyd, because they're both kind of guitarists that I think their most impressive work is being expressive. Of course, they have that technique in underneath that where they can do amazing stuff and scales and sweep and all that stuff. But that's not what really makes them stand out. It's the feeling that they play with that is everything. So that's why I admire them so much. And a rhythm guitarist, I have a few. It's the first Mayhem guitarist, Euronymous from the Mysterious Dumb Satanas, because really really expanded on what you could do with the guitar in heavy metal. At least for me, it was a real eye opener, and lots more of the usage of the chords. Um, then I would say also maybe an odd one would be Tom G. Warrior from Celtic Frost, because like being a brilliant guitarist isn't always what you think when you're listening to those old Celtic Frost albums, because it's kind of like it's all over the place, and trying to make like a precise annotation or tablature of what he's doing would maybe look a little bit like a piece of modern art because it's so weird and wrong in a sense. But just that whole point of playing with your attitude and being able to translate that into sound and sort of circumventing technique in such a um, brilliant and convincing way is also been very inspiring from the beginning. So that's a little bit of a bouquet, and I guess of course I do enjoy listening to um, Steve Vai and Ingrid Malmsteen in particular. Those two guys, just because sometimes it's fun to just drop your jaw and
To
be
shred.
impressed.
Yeah.
Exactly, it's like wow, is that even possible? I saw in Italy a gig by Ingrid Malmsteen like 7 years ago, and even though he was, I guess, over his height in his career, it's still just ridiculous to watch, like how you can do stuff like that with your hands. It's fantastic.
So I must ask, if you're a fan of Robert Fripp, Larry Lalonde famously was, before he joined Primus, was in The Possessed. Did you get into Larry Lalonde's playing at all? Because he's always reminded me a lot of the way Robert Fripp approaches his guitar lines in King Crimson. I should say the way that Larry Lalonde approaches his guitar in Primus reminds me a lot of the way that Robert Fripp approaches his guitar playing in King Crimson.
It's fantastic. Possessed. I haven't really gone and studied the particulars of his guitar playing outside of Possessed and Primus. I have to be honest. Is there recordings by just him? Is that what you're saying?
No, no, I'm talking about the way that he was a full on metal guy in one of the first death metal bands. The Possessed, of course, as we all know, released Seven Churches, which was a seminal death metal album. But all of a sudden, in about 1990 or 1991 or thereabouts, he came out with either Suck on This or Frizzle Fry. I'm a massive Primus fan. I'll let everybody know that now.
Yeah,
Being a bass player, of course, Les Claypool's one of the guys that I look up to. But Larry Lalonde is a guitarist, so I had Seven Churches as a young fella and loved the way he played on that. And then thought, is that the same guy that's on the Possessed
exactly.
albums? That's on the Primus albums, and I couldn't believe that it was the same guy because his approach was completely different. But being an old King Crimson fan, I always found that Larry Lalonde's playing reminded me a lot of the way that Robert Fripp played as well. And you mentioned Robert Fripp, and I guess the link between Robert Fripp and heavy metal would have to be, in my view, Larry Lalonde's excellent guitar playing. And mate, I can actually hear a little, now that you mention it, I can actually hear a little bit of Robert Fripp's guitar playing in yours.
Perhaps, yeah. So I've just been listening to it so much, and went to a few King Crimson gigs, and ended up being just one of those guys, the nerds in the front row, just staring at Robert Fripp the entire gig, and thinking like, what? How's that even possible? And I think it's that sort of mix of basic techniques and sort of the idea behind it, mixed with that. Yeah, it's a sort of a way of overruling, in a sense, the expected with some of the things he does in his leads. That's I guess maybe he brought it in from jazz or something. But it's very, very liberating to hear the way it is treating scales and so on. Hey man, sorry, talking about liberated and free art. We have to go into the last question. Sorry, because
sorry, mate.
The schedule is
it's
anything other than liberating.
All right, okay. Final question for you, mate, would be: what's your relationship been like with Australian audiences over the years?
First, it was a relationship of long distance longing and frustration. We kept building because we almost went there and it was ridiculous. I think it was like 4 or 5 times where we got to the point where we almost packed our bags to get ready, and then stuff got canceled. And finally, we got to go there in 2013, which was amazing. It was just the best time ever, and we got to go back there last fall, which was also great. And now we're really, really, really hoping that we're going to be able to come not too far into 2018. Because we feel like when we first got there, the feeling was of coming back to a place that you've been many times. It was one of those weird times when you start a conversation and it feels like you've been having it all night. It was great. And so, yeah, we have to come back. It's as easy as that. We love the atmosphere there. The humor is extremely compatible with the Norwegian. The same interest for alcoholic beverages and the music.
Agreed, mate. Well, look, I better let you go, but I want to congratulate you. You're an excellent guitarist, and not just an excellent guitarist, you're an excellent musician. Of course, you've got your album that was released this year, Bardspec, through By North, so I would love to ask you a few questions about that, but we've run out of time. E is an excellent album as well. I'd love to catch up with you when you come to Australia, and I'll certainly be in the audience if you do tour at the very least.
Excellent. See you there, then.
No worries, mate. All the very best. Catch ya.
You too. Take care. Bye.
You've been listening to the Scars and Guitars podcast series, and my name is Andrew Mackay-Smith. That interview subject was Ivar Bjørnson from the outfit Enslaved. Thanks so much for listening.